Generational wealth is a foolish idea. Sure, it's a noble idea, the idea that you can generate lots of money during your lifetime and therefore use that to create a better time for those generations after you. I completely understand it, but it's a very stupid thing as well. You might think, okay, if I build all of this money together, put it in very strategic investments, this means that my children, my family can carry on and they'll have all of this wealth available to them and they won't be absolute idiots with this money. Well, here's the problem with generational wealth, is that they're going to absolutely go straight through that money. You've got to think about it from another perspective. Really, what's going to happen is these individuals are going to decide, you know what, I've got money in my future, I'm not going to be motivated. Now, obviously, they're not going to think as logically as that, but they're not going to have that same drive as someone else if they're just sat there knowing that mummy and daddy are going to bail them out or that there's a pot of money waiting for them in the future. Like, generational wealth is such a stupid thing. I see it on Twitter all the time. They're like, yeah, well, I'm going to build this for my generation and my family's going to do really well. And I don't even know if they've even seen the studies that it takes 3 generations for 90% of these generations or these families in the study to lose all their wealth. 3 generations, that's it. That's how quickly you can lose the wealth. And therefore, there's better things that you can pass on to your offspring, for example. Already knowing that they're not going to be as motivated when they've got money. Now, you might go, well, actually, no, my family will be motivated. Or I grew up with money, therefore I was still motivated and I got here now. Yeah, but imagine how much further you'd be if you didn't have money to start with. You've got to know what it's like not to have money in order to want more of it. You need to have that drive. It's why you see a lot of self-made millionaires, and that's literally a majority of the millionaires around at the moment, because they go for it and they push for the best that they can become. To sit there and go, yeah, well, I'm just going to give my son or daughter money and they'll be fine. Well, okay, you might go on a different angle. You might go, actually, well, this gives them the money or the resources so they can get ahead in life. To be honest, all it does is it takes away some other important resources in the favor of money. Now, let's say they're struggling. Your son or daughter's trying to run a business, but it's not quite working, right? And they've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. And you think, well, look, I'll just give them a financial handout. I'll give them a small loan of 6 figures, right? You give them £100,000 to help them out on their way. Well, sure, maybe that will turn into a successful business, but they don't learn their lesson. If that comes to failure again, or this instance repeats itself, they're not going to know exactly what to do. They're not going to have that strategy in their mind. Instead, they're going to go, I need a handout, give me some money, instead of planning for the future or effectively breaking through it. I think such an important lesson in life is overcoming these obstacles on your own. Knowing, okay, at the moment, my business isn't great. It's not making as much money as I'd like. It's not unsustainable, but I want to be earning more. It's that constant problem-solving process. To be told, yeah, here's 100 grand, good luck, you can scale it up now. You don't have that same learning experience from it, because if that same mistake happens, again, you're not going to have access to that capital. You might do, but you might not. And that puts you in a situation where, again, you've not learned anything from it. And this instills from a very young age. Now, if you're teaching your kids young and you're teaching them about the importance of money, it's very important that they need to learn and absorb as much as possible, but also know that they're not going to get any of it. They need to realize that they need to build it themselves. They need to acquire these skills. It's like, for instance, where easy times create weak men. Weak men create tough times, and tough times create strong men. If you can stimulate an environment, or simulate, sorry, I think that's the wrong word, where you can simulate an environment growing up to your children, for example, where the times aren't as easy as someone just going, look, here's a pot of money, go spend it on what you want, and don't spoil them, because quite frankly, this current generation, I've seen so many spoiled kids on their tablets all day because the parents are too lazy to even look after them. Yeah, I'm talking about you watching this video. I bet there's 1 or 2 of you right now probably watching this with your kid on a tablet. I'm not a fan of that behavior. Sort it out. I understand, yeah, sure, it's a very easy vice. You can chuck it to them. They'll be distracted for hours. But no, that's not good. The same thing applies here. You've given them not the opportunity to learn from it. It's important to teach the value of finance, but to give them that money and that jumpstart is only going to lack them in the future, where they lack the skills they need to maintain it. For example, let's say you have handed down the money, and at the age of 18, your children are going to get a substantial amount of wealth, which means they'll never have to work again. Now, many of those are going to blow through that money unless they're taught how to deal with money. 18 is likely too young of an age for that, for example. If they haven't had a job before, they're not going to value money. They're not going to value the time it takes to build that level of money. Therefore, they're more likely to just spend it on things that aren't going to last that long, and they're going to be back to square one. This is not something I'm sure any of you want if you were looking to build all this wealth, spending years, decades, sacrificing the quality of your own life for your offspring to have a better time, just for them to blow through $1 million in a year on random shit like TikTok rubbish that you don't actually need. But that's likely going to happen. And it's the whole idea here that you're sacrificing your own life so that generations beyond you can do better. Again, a very noble cause, especially those, for instance, that sacrifice their lives in the war. Don't get me wrong, that is an extremely honourable and noble thing to do, of course. But the idea here is that the experiences also count. If you're sacrificing your life to an extreme where you don't have any experiences, you don't have these stories, you don't have these lessons to teach your generations, then surely they're going to be left with more blank spaces. They're not going to have the critical steps in their journey to be able to go up higher because they've never been told these experiences. You learn through your own experiences and therefore you reflect that in your own character. If you're unable to teach that part of yourself to your offspring, then obviously they're going to be lacking in another area and they're going to become weak. And you don't want weak offspring. You want genetics. You want the strongest family that you can have. At least as a male, you want to know that your family is going to rule, right? It's a game of conquest. As a guy, you want to know that, look, okay, how far can the family dominate? How well can they do? You want them to become the best versions of themselves. You don't want them to be sat on their ass doing fuck all the time, waiting for handouts from mummy and daddy. That's exactly not what you want. Again, if you're watching this and that's exactly what you want your children to have, just because you had some tough times when you were younger, then again, it's a fool's game, but you're going to watch that one blow up in front of you, and I don't think you're going to like the results. You might go, okay, well, right, I'm not sacrificing my life, but I am putting some money aside, and this money could be quite useful for them. For instance, they could use it on student debt. Again, student debt is a situational one because at the moment, I don't think there is much in the way of value in the form of a university degree. That being said, I've not been to university myself. I've done A-levels and I've also done college. I've not gone to university. I had the grades potentially to do it. And I was lucky that actually I didn't apply for it in the end because I got bored of my A-levels. And in that way, I'm fortunate. And that's not to argue against some university degrees. Now, some of them have a lot of value. Let's say you wanted to be a veterinarian, right? You've got to do many years of studying in the medical field to be able to do this. That I completely understand. Linked to ones where it is required in a trade, I get it. But these university degrees and things that maybe aren't as important or aren't as great at generating wealth may just not be worth it. For instance, a lot of people with like an English literature degree, is it teaching them how to write great literature? Probably not. Is it teaching them to work in a cafe? No, but that's where they're ending up anyway. Right? It's not worthwhile. And knowing that they're going to go to university and have their student debt paid off, again, demotivates them. They're just going to go, well, I'll do any old course. I can go to university, right? I'll just go out and enjoy it. I'll blow the money. It doesn't matter because it'll be paid off. They're not going to have that same motivation. Again, it goes back to the value of that money. If they realize, okay, look, you know what? Look, this is going to put me in 45 grand of student loan debt. What's the time value of money? How hard would I have to work to achieve this? Maybe they would be a little bit more decisive or more analytical and go, okay, you know what? I enjoy English, but if I want to write a book, I'll write a book. Instead, I'm going to do something more productive. I'm going to spend that money and I'm going to get an apprenticeship. And I'm actually going to invest that money once I've done my apprenticeship into creating my own plumbing business through the lessons that I have learned from being in the trade. And by doing that, they're going to have a much better angle at life, in my opinion. Now, that's to say generational wealth is foolish in most methods. Now, me personally, I'm never going to do this. I'm not going to be handing out any form of money to my offspring. And this may change as perhaps years go on and I may become wiser or stupider, who knows, right? And at the moment, my logic behind this is that it's an easy way out and it's not something I'm going to do. Ideally, I'd like to donate my money to charities and tell them that. I'm not going to be, look, you're going to get a load of money at the end. I'm not going to not give them the opportunity to do what they need to either, but there's a balance and there's always a great way where you need to find a moderation and a balance between everything. I'm not going to give my children any form of a handout, but at the same time, it's not like I'm not going to be there and available for them. Give them perhaps the opportunity with my time instead and teach them the more important lessons so they can do it themselves. Rather than just saying, like, here's a bunch of money, have that. And there is one or two wise ways that you can plan ahead for generational wealth, and you would have to really incorporate it in the form of a trust, and you'd likely want some criteria to be fulfilled before that's done. But even then, it's still very likely that you're going to fall into the odds that this is going to go wrong. For example, this article here on the NASDAQ actually says, why do 70% of families lose their wealth in their second generation? Now, this goes into a deep methodology where generations are not taught to talk about money. Again, so important to distill in your offspring. The prior generations worry that the next generation will become lazy and entitled. Exactly. But by spending that themselves, that seems like a really weird way of doing it. I guess that's more or less my angle here, where I'm saying, you know what, the next generation will become lazy and entitled if I give them all that money. Therefore, any value that I create, I will destroy. Well, in that way, that sounds like a very toxic way of dealing with things. But in that light, you might go, instead of destroying it, you're going to create your own charity and you're going to fund that. So that is able to save, I don't know, cats in Cyprus, right? And you might have that charity and it might be for a good cause, for example. But to give it to your offspring like that is not the one and not something I would ever do. Again, you would need to really look into this. But if you're only saving your money and you're sacrificing the quality of your life to save money for your offspring, you need to rethink this and really take the time and sit down, meditate even, and work this one out, because it is not the right course of action. Thank you for watching. Have a fantastic day.